Generative AI seems to be everywhere. Your computer can now paint in the style of Van Gogh. It can produce any picture you want it to. Software can now convincingly swap out one face for another. They can make Mr. Krabs sing Someone Like You.
Never mind, I'll find someone like you.
In seconds, computers can now edit videos. They can write code, they can write your essays, they can write poems, and they can write text to your mum. AI seems to be rapidly outperforming people. This is creating some legitimate anxiety for job security across all industries. The creative arts has generally been understood to be an exploration of the human condition. But even this industry is under threat. What does generative AI mean for artists and their job security? What does it mean for the future of art? If we can understand that art is a vital component of human culture, what then does it mean for the future of humanity itself? Let's cut to the chase. As an artist, as a filmmaker, as someone who just generally believes that human expression is incredibly valuable, how scared of AI should I be? To answer this question, we first need to understand what AI actually is and what it isn't. We tend to imagine AI as a cognizant, nearly sentient, all-seeing, ever-learning entity, which makes for a pretty great anxiety trigger. The truth is a little more underwhelming.
It's kind of funny because AI doesn't mean anything.
This is Nina Rajcic, an artist, researcher, and developer currently working with Monash University's Sensi Lab.
AI has no actual definition no kind of precise definition in any field.
AI doesn't refer to just one program or one model. It doesn't even refer to one technology or even one approach. It's not as simple as that. It's important to understand the difference between the ideas of general AI and narrow AI. General AI is the type of AI we see in Hollywood movies. This is the AI that can do anything a living being could do, being entirely autonomous and operating at its own whims. Here's the thing though, general AI is still a hypothesis. It doesn't exist. The only AI we have in operation today is narrow AI. Narrow AI is trained to do a singular job. To build these programs is an extremely complicated endeavor that requires massive amounts of data and labor and resources. Still, there are programs that do their jobs excellently, but they can't operate outside of their assigned task. This is why DALL-E still struggles to generate text. It isn't a text-generating model.
So AI is just a blanket term for a whole lot of different technologies.
This is John McCormack, another AI artist and researcher, and is the founder of Sensi Lab.
What most people think of as AI these days is basically built around the idea of what's called neural networks, which are basically very, very simple approximations of neurons in your brain. Although I think it's important to understand that a neural network is not like a brain at all. It doesn't work like a brain. It's not physical like a brain. It's metaphorically like networks and neurons in a brain.
To operate a metaphorical brain, AI depends on a data set. AI works by analyzing data sets, in which it will identify certain patterns and probabilities. It will then arrange this information into a systematic code called a model. This is what we feed information into and get results out of. This model is what we, the general members of the public, will refer to as AI. Basically, AI is a very complex organizational system. It might help to think of it as a camera. You could classify a camera as an organizational system for light. Light is processed through a system of glass and analyzed by a sensor to produce an outcome. In an AI model, the light is your prompt, the camera lens is the data set, the sensor is the model, and the picture is your result. It's not a perfect analogy, but it's useful. It can be useful also when considering the problems that arise out of generative AI. Like a camera, AI can be thought of as a tool for art making.
We saw a similar thing with the advent of photography when painting was the way in which people rendered portraits and images of scenes and things. A painter would go and paint a picture. And when photography first came along, people said, well, this is the end of painting because, look, you can make something that's better than the best painting. It's instant. It's really efficient. It enables you to capture the moment in ways in which painting can't. That's the end of painting. And, of course, that's not how it turned out. So photography eventually went from a technology that was rejected by the art world to something that was embraced by the art world. People still paint because painting is capable of doing things that photography can't. I think still humans are capable of doing things that the AI systems can't.
Whether or not you're threatened by AI as an artist depends on whether you consider yourself the landscape painting or the artist in this analogy. If you are merely creative to simply generate content, AI's integration might put you in some trouble. But if you're creating work to communicate something that speaks to the human experience, well, there's not a model made for that just yet.
Because I think people do still want to communicate, right? Like they want to consume art that a human made and relate to it.
But even if AI mightn't threaten our jobs, there are still issues to consider. That data that AI models use, this is where a bulk of the problems lie. Firstly, there are issues of plagiarism and copyright. In January of this year, 3 AI image generators were filed with a class action lawsuit for this matter. It brings up a swirling, circular debate that usually boils down to the existential question of what is art and what is art's value. The questions these AI models raise can't be ignored. But there are other, more tangible issues with that data as well.
I think the other big issue that maybe people mightn't be so aware of is the censorship that goes on in the training data, or at least has in the past. So large companies that make these big AIs use labor from developing countries, usually Africa, to look at to train basically other AIs to look at things like imagery that's obscene or offensive.
Those data sets that AI use to operate have to be trained. To do this, that data has to be labeled, usually manually. Laborers will go through images and assign tags to them that the AI can reference. To ensure that the models don't accidentally produce obscene or disturbing imagery, real-life people have to assign these images as being off-limits. It's extremely important to make sure that users aren't accidentally exposed to horrific imagery, of course. But because of how these models work, the safeguarding of users comes at the expense of laborers.
So basically humans are exposed to all of these images day in, day out. They get paid minimum wage. So the ethical concerns go not just to the data and how it's sourced, but also how the human augmentation, what's called human reinforcement learning, that exposes people unethically, I think, to the worst of human creations, the worst of human nature, constantly for days and weeks and months. And those companies have little or no responsibility for the psychological impact of that on the people who are doing it.
A fundamental question when considering AI and all other technology is who and what for. We need to keep this in mind when we argue any case for new technology. Is the exploitation of people worth the power of generating an image in a few seconds? These questions are imperative to ask, and to ask them now, because AI isn't going anywhere. The rise of AI has instilled a lot of fear and worry into our communities, but we have been led to fear an idea, a bogeyman that doesn't yet exist. This fear leads us away from the immediate problems that are happening now. Our lives will change, that's certain, but it's up to all of us to decide how.
Let's see.